Hi everyone, Jennifer Blevins-Smith with Integral Clinic Solutions, and you're watching my YouTube channel, Navigating the Business of Medicine. Today I want to talk about the dreaded topic of discharging patients from your practice. This is another topic a lot of people don't like to talk about, but it does come up now and then, even in the best practices with the best patients, with the best providers and staff. It's just reality. We are all human, we're people, and sometimes just certain people don't get along and mesh well with other people. And it doesn't mean anybody did anything wrong or anybody's at fault. It just happens. And sometimes things happen and it's just not a good fit for a patient-provider relationship. And that's okay. But how you handle those situations is what really matters. Now, I am not a healthcare attorney. I do not study law. I am not even in law whatsoever. So before you decide how you're going to handle discharging patients at your practice, and if you're concerned about your local state laws, guidelines surrounding this, I encourage you to speak to a healthcare attorney or an attorney in general that might have some knowledge about this on kind of what your rights are, what's expected of you as a practice when you discharge a patient, just to make sure that you don't get a lawsuit and you don't get accused of something that was not intentional, right? I mean, we all have good intentions most of the time, and sometimes we still get ourselves in trouble just because we maybe didn't think about everything, or we didn't try to look around all the corners to make sure we are addressing everything appropriately. So a healthcare attorney and attorney in general will be able to help you, guide you in this situation. Discharging patients, like I said, does not usually happen very often, but there are some circumstances that could warrant this. It could be somebody prescribing themselves medications under the doctor's information. Somehow they got their information and called pharmacies. That's a lot bigger deal than just discharging. It's also a legal thing that would need to be followed up on. But maybe it's a financial thing. Maybe you had to send them to collections, and your office policy is that you don't keep patients who have been sent to collections. Maybe they were not very nice to your staff or nice to your provider, or they went against some kind of agreement with the provider of things that they needed to uphold for certain prescriptions or certain things, and they didn't, okay? So there are some situations out there. You do have rights as a provider, as a practice owner, a manager, to discharge patients. The one thing you do not want to be accused of is abandoning a patient. If you are going to discharge a patient for whatever reason, you want to make sure you have a lot of documentation surrounding the reason and why you came up with that final solution. And it should be documented thoroughly. If there's multiple instances that led up to it, then it all should be documented. And it should be documented in real time. It shouldn't be like, oh, we need to discharge this patient, and then you go back and you start documenting everything. That's not going to be good. You need to be documenting things from the get-go. And hopefully you have the policy in your practice that everybody documents their interactions with their patients no matter what. Because if it's not written down, it didn't happen. You never know when those notes are going to come in handy in the future, not just for discharging patients, but for maybe getting things covered at insurance, maybe for trying to get referrals or authorizations. Maybe it's jogging your memory for care in the long run of things that you've already tried that maybe you've spoken to the patient about over the phone, but it wasn't in a formal office visit type situation. So it wasn't documented in a progress note, but there was a telephone note. You just never know. I can't tell you how many times people tell me I over document, if that's even possible, and it ended up coming around and really benefiting us. And people are like, oh my gosh, everybody needs to document like Jen. So it's not bad to over document. It's not possible, okay? Over document. So you want to make sure that it's all supported. You also want to make sure that when you're drafting up this final formal letter to the patient to inform them that you are discharging them, I would make sure that you send them a paper letter, you keep a copy of it, you sign it, wet signature. The provider, the owner, needs to wet sign it so they know it's serious. Send it certified so that you have documentation when it's delivered, and if they never get it, then you can see that too, but at least you have tracking to show that you tried to notify the patient. And in the letter, you should make sure you let them know that you're going to offer them emergency care for the next however many days. I would recommend at least 30 days, and tell them it's to allow them to establish care at another provider's office, similar to your same specialty and same services, and that you will refill their medications for them during that time, one time. And just make it very clear that you're not just dropping them and hoping that they can figure it out, that you're doing everything you can with good intention to get them set up to be successful at finding another provider. If you have other places in your area that are taking new patients in your specialty, provide their contact information and say, here are some other people or practices in the area you may want to check out that might be a better fit for you, and provide them the name, the address, the phone number. Anything you can do to show that you have good intentions and that you're trying to help them is only going to benefit you. But again, you also want to make sure that you have a very strict definition of what emergency means, right? Like, you're not going to let them schedule a physical with you within the next 30 days because they need a physical. That's not considered usually an emergency, right? An urgent situation. Emergency would be for illness, injury, depending on your specialty too, right? But making sure that you're refilling their medications for one more 30-day supply, something like that, until they can get established. A lot of times discharged patients and practices have to do with like controlled medication and abuse of that, and going against the agreements that the provider has set up with that patient. And in that situation, you need to make sure that you only give them the minimum amount necessary to cover them until that expiration of that time frame that you have said you would be their medical provider until they found someone else. You don't want to overprescribe, but you cannot just not prescribe it to them, because a lot of those medications, if they go off of them, could have detrimental side effects and withdrawal, and you don't want to do that either. So you just have to make sure that you're being very mindful of keeping the patient's safety in hand, their health in hand and forefront of your mind, and that you're also protecting your business and your career. You're protecting everything, keeping the patient's best interest in mind, keeping your best interest, and trying not to let either one of them overstep, getting a nice balance in there. Again, documentation, super important. Making sure you're not abandoning the patient with their prescriptions, medical coverage, treatment, whatever that they would need from you. And just making sure that there is some way to internally communicate to your staff, and maybe put messages in patient accounts when they're discharged, a pop-up that comes up when they pull up their account, or something to inform everybody that they've been discharged so they don't get mistakenly scheduled. And that can happen usually in bigger practices, or people might forget. It's just always good to have something to remind someone when they go to the account. Always send a medical record release form with that letter. So you are encouraging them to complete that so that you can get the records over to whomever they choose to resume their care. And of course, you would need that signed and dated by the patient because of HIPAA laws and regulations. But you can give that to them as a tool. They can fax it back to you. They can drop it off. They can mail it to you. But at least you're starting that process, initiating that process for them as well, and explaining that in the letter too. Okay. If you have any questions or comments about discharging patients, again, I encourage you to speak with an attorney, somebody who knows the law. Your state might have different laws than another state. Your insurances might have different requirements than another insurance, so you'd want to look at your contracts. There's so many moving parts here. I'm just bringing up some things that would benefit and keep everybody safe across the board, just by no patient abandonment, documenting everything, and going from there. Again, questions, comments, I'll do my best to try to answer, but if it's something legal or something I'm not sure about, I'm not going to speculate, but please leave that in the comments below. Smash the thumbs up button if today's video is helpful. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And please share this with anybody whom is in the healthcare field that you feel would benefit. I appreciate the support. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.